My husband died on a Tuesday morning in March. 3 days later, while cleaning out his garage, I found a photograph hidden behind his toolbox. A woman I'd never seen before. On the back, in his handwriting, "Forgive me, Clara, I never stopped loving her. My name is Clara Mitchell. I'm 62 years old, and until that moment, I thought I knew everything about my life. I thought I knew the man I'd been married to for 40 years. I thought I understood the shape of my own existence. I was wrong about all of it. The funeral had been on Friday. St. Michael's Church on Clinton Avenue. The same church where Robert and I had been married in 1985. The same church where we'd baptized our daughter Amy. The pews had been full. Robert was well known in Newark, respected. He'd owned Mitchell's Hardware on Broad Street for 35 years. People came. They shook my hand. They said he was a good man, a pillar of the community. They said I was lucky to have had him for so long. I smiled. I thanked them. I accepted their casseroles and their sympathy cards. And inside, I felt nothing. Not grief, not sadness. Just a strange, hollow numbness, like I'd been carved out with a spoon and left empty. Robert had died of a heart attack. Sudden, the doctor said. Massive. He'd been in the garage working on an old clock he'd been trying to fix for months. I'd found him there, slumped over his workbench, his tools scattered around him. By the time the ambulance arrived, he was already gone. 3 days. That's how long it took before I could bring myself to go back into that garage. Amy offered to help, but I told her no. This was something I needed to do alone. She didn't understand. How could she? She was 37 years old, pregnant with her second child, grieving her father. She didn't need to see me fall apart. The garage was detached from the house, a small wooden structure at the back of our property. Robert had built it himself in 1987, 2 years after we'd bought the house. It was his space, his domain. I rarely went in there. He liked it that way. A man needs a place of his own, he used to say. I never questioned it. That Monday morning, I stood in front of the garage door with a roll of garbage bags in one hand and a box of tissues in the other. The March air was cold and damp, carrying the smell of rain. I took a deep breath, unlocked the door, and stepped inside. The smell hit me immediately. Motor oil, sawdust, old coffee, and something else. Something uniquely Robert. His cologne. His sweat. The scent of him still hung in the air, as if he'd just stepped out for a moment and would be right back. For a second, I couldn't breathe. The grief I'd been holding at bay for 3 days suddenly surged up, threatening to drown me. I forced myself to look around. The garage was exactly as he'd left it. His tools hung on pegboard walls in perfect obsessive rows. Hammers arranged by size. Screwdrivers sorted by type. His workbench was covered with the guts of the old clock he'd been fixing. Tiny gears and springs spread out on a white cloth. A half-empty mug of coffee sat beside it, a skin of mold forming on the surface. I started with the easy things. I threw away the coffee. I swept the floor. I packed his tools into boxes methodically, trying not to think about the fact that his hands had held each one. Trying not to remember the way he'd hum while he worked, always the same song, Stand By Me by Benny King. It took me 2 hours to clear the workbench and most of the shelves. I was reaching for his red toolbox, the big one he'd had since before we were married, when I noticed it. A loose board in the wall behind the toolbox. It wasn't obvious. You'd have to be looking for it to see it. But once I did, I couldn't unsee it. I pulled the toolbox away from the wall. The board came away easily, as if it had been removed many times before. Behind it was a hollow space, and inside that space was a shoebox. An old one, the cardboard soft with age. The logo on the lid had faded to almost nothing, but I could still make out the words, Tom McCann. A shoe brand that hadn't existed in decades. My hands were shaking as I lifted the box out. It was heavier than I expected. I sat down on Robert's old stool, the box in my lap, and for a long moment I just stared at it. Some part of me knew that whatever was inside would change everything. That once I opened it, there would be no going back. I opened it. On top was the photograph. A Polaroid, the colors faded to that distinctive 70s wash of orange and brown. A young woman, maybe 25, sitting on a park bench. She was black, beautiful, with an afro that framed her face like a halo. She wore bell-bottom jeans and a peasant blouse, and she was laughing at something off camera, her head thrown back, her whole face alight with joy. I turned it over. On the back, in Robert's careful handwriting, "Forgive me, Clara. I never stopped loving her." The world tilted. I actually felt it tilt, like the floor had suddenly become a ship's deck in a storm. I gripped the edge of the workbench to steady myself, my heart hammering so hard I could hear it in my ears. Who was she? I looked back in the box. Beneath the photograph were letters. Dozens of them, maybe 50 or more, tied together with a piece of string. The envelopes were yellowed with age, the stamps archaic. I picked up the bundle with trembling hands and untied the string. The top letter was addressed to Robert Mitchell, with an address in Queens I didn't recognize. The return address was Newark, our address, the house we were living in right now. But the handwriting wasn't mine. The postmark was dated September 1982. I opened it. The paper was thin, the ink slightly faded, but still readable. It began, "My dearest Robert, I don't know if you'll get this letter. I don't know if you'll read it. But I have to try. I have to tell you." I read the whole thing right there, sitting on Robert's stool in his garage, surrounded by his tools and his projects and his lies. And with every word, the life I thought I'd known crumbled a little more. The letter was from a woman named Diane. She was writing to tell Robert that she was pregnant, that she loved him, that she understood he had obligations, that word in quotes like she was bitter about it, but that she wanted him to know. That she hoped somehow they could still be together. There were more letters. I read them all, one after another, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold the paper. Diane wrote to Robert for 2 years. At first, the letters were hopeful, loving. She talked about the baby, a girl, she said, born in March 1983. She talked about wanting Robert to meet his daughter, about waiting for him, about believing he would leave his wife and be with her. But as the months passed, the tone changed. The hope curdled into bitterness, then anger, then finally a kind of resigned sadness. The last letter, dated November 1984, was short. "Robert, I can't do this anymore. I can't keep waiting for a man who will never choose me. I'm moving to Philadelphia. Please don't try to find me. I hope you have a good life with your wife." I hope it was worth it. I sat there for a long time after I finished reading, the letters scattered around me like fallen leaves. Outside, I could hear the sounds of the neighborhood. A car passing, someone's dog barking, the distant wail of a siren. Normal sounds. The world going on as if nothing had happened. As if my entire life hadn't just been revealed as a fraud. Robert had been cheating on me. In 1982, 1983, 1984, the early years of our marriage, when I thought we were happy, when we were trying to have a baby of our own, when I believed we were building a life together, he'd had a whole other life, a whole other woman, a whole other child, a daughter. Robert had a daughter who would be 42 years old now, a daughter I'd never known existed. I stood up, my legs unsteady, and went back to the box. There had to be more. There had to be something that would help me understand. At the bottom of the box, beneath the letters, I found it. A birth certificate. Baby girl, born March 15, 1983, at Newark Beth Israel Medical Center. Mother, Diane Washington. Father, Robert Michael Mitchell. Her name was Jasmine. Jasmine Diane Washington. I folded the birth certificate and put it in my pocket. Then I gathered up all the letters, put them back in the box with the photograph, and carried the whole thing into the house. I didn't cry. I couldn't cry. I felt like I'd been flash frozen, every emotion locked away behind a wall of ice. Inside, I made myself a cup of tea and sat down at the kitchen table with the box in front of me. I stared at it for a long time, trying to decide what to do. Part of me wanted to burn it all. Burn the letters and the photograph and the birth certificate and pretend I'd never found them. Go back to grieving my husband like a normal widow. Go back to believing the lie. But I couldn't. Because there was a woman out there, Jasmine, who didn't know her father was dead. Who maybe didn't even know who her father was. And whatever Robert had done, whatever lies he'd told, she deserved to know. I opened my laptop and typed Jasmine, Washington, Philadelphia into Google. Hundreds of results came up. I narrowed it down. Jasmine Washington, Philadelphia, born 1983. Still too many. I tried Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram. I searched for hours, scrolling through profiles of women who might or might not be Robert's daughter, trying to find some resemblance, some clue. Finally, just as I was about to give up, I found her. Jasmine D. Washington, age 42, living in Philadelphia. A teacher at an elementary school in West Philly. Her profile picture showed a woman with Robert's eyes. That same deep brown, that same slight downward tilt at the outer corners. She was smiling in the photo, standing in a classroom surrounded by children, and she looked so much like him it took my breath away. I clicked through to her profile. It was mostly private, but I could see a few public posts. Pictures of her students' artwork. A post about a fundraiser for school supplies. A photo from 2 years ago of her with an older woman. The caption read, "Happy 65th birthday to the best mom in the world." The woman was Diane. I recognized her from the Polaroid, though 40 years had passed. She was still beautiful, her face lined with age, but her smile the same. I stared at that photo for a long time. Diane and Jasmine, mother and daughter, smiling at the camera. They looked happy. They looked like they'd built a good life together. And Robert had missed all of it, by choice. He'd chosen me, chosen our life, chosen to pretend they didn't exist. Why? That was the question that kept circling in my mind, relentless as a vulture. Why had he kept the letters? Why had he kept the photograph? If he'd really chosen to leave them behind, why couldn't he let them go? "Forgive me, Clara, I never stopped loving her." That's what he'd written. Not, "I never stopped thinking about her." Not, "I never stopped wondering." He never stopped loving her. Past tense for me, present tense for her. Even after 40 years, even lying in his garage, dying, he was still carrying her with him. I closed the laptop and looked at the clock. It was almost 5 in the evening. I'd been sitting at that table for 6 hours, lost in Robert's secret life. Amy had called twice. I'd ignored both calls. I couldn't talk to her yet. Couldn't tell her that the father she'd just buried had a whole other daughter. A daughter who came first. Instead, I did something I'd never done before. I poured myself a glass of Robert's whiskey, the expensive stuff he kept in the cabinet above the refrigerator, and I drank it in one burning gulp. Then I poured another. By the third glass, I'd made a decision. I was going to find Jasmine. I was going to tell her who her father was. And I was going to tell her he was dead. It took me 2 days to work up the courage. 2 days of rehearsing what I would say, how I would say it. 2 days of drinking too much coffee and not sleeping and trying to figure out how you tell a complete stranger that her absent father, the man who abandoned her before she could even know him, had just died. On Wednesday morning, I got in my car and drove to Philadelphia. It was a 2-hour drive, and I spent the whole time gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles went white, practicing my opening line. "Hi, I'm Clara Mitchell. You don't know me, but I was married to your father." No, too abrupt. "Hi, I'm Clara. I need to talk to you about Robert Mitchell." Better, but still terrible. I had Jasmine's school address from her Facebook page. I arrived at 3:15, just as school was letting out. I sat in my car across the street, watching the doors, waiting. At 3:30, she came out. She was wearing jeans and a bright yellow cardigan, her hair in long braids. She stood on the steps, waving goodbye to a group of kids, her smile warm and genuine. She looked like a good teacher, like a good person. I got out of my car before I could change my mind. My legs felt like water as I crossed the street. She didn't notice me at first. She was talking to another teacher, laughing about something. Up close, the resemblance to Robert was even stronger. She had his nose, his jawline, his hands. "Excuse me," I said. My voice came out hoarse. "Are you Jasmine Washington?" She turned, and for a moment, we just looked at each other. She smiled politely, the smile of someone who doesn't know you but is trying to be friendly. "Yes, that's me. Can I help you? My name is Clara Mitchell." I took a breath. "I need to talk to you about your father." The smile disappeared. Her whole body went rigid, her eyes suddenly wary. "My father?" She said the word like it tasted bad. "I don't have a father." "Yes, you do." His name was Robert Michael Mitchell. He died 2 weeks ago. The other teacher made a small sound. Surprise or concern, I couldn't tell, and stepped back, giving us space. Jasmine stared at me, her face unreadable. For a long moment, she didn't say anything. Then, "Who are you?" "I was his wife." Her laugh was sharp, bitter. "Of course you were. Let me guess, you just found out about me? Found some old letters or something and decided to play detective?" She shook her head. "Look, lady, I don't know what you want, but I'm not interested." "That man," she said, "that man with such venom it made me flinch, was never my father." A father is someone who shows up, someone who cares. He was just a sperm donor. "I know," I said quietly. "You're right, but I still think you deserve to know he's gone. And I reached into my purse and pulled out the box. I think you deserve to have these." She looked at the box, then at me, suspicion written all over her face. "What is it?" "Letters from your mother to him, and a photograph, and your birth certificate. Things he kept. Things he couldn't let go of." For a moment, I thought she was going to refuse. Thought she was going to tell me to get lost, to take my dead husband's guilt and shove it. But then she reached out and took the box. Our fingers touched briefly and I felt a jolt, like touching a live wire. This woman was my husband's daughter. His first daughter. The one he'd chosen to leave. "Thank you," she said. Her voice was softer now, uncertain. I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything. I thought you should know. About him, I swallowed hard. About the fact that he kept these. That he never forgot you." Her eyes filled with tears. She blinked them back furiously. "Forgetting me would have been kinder," she said. "Remembering me but never showing up? That's just cruel." She was right. I knew she was right. But I said it anyway, the thing I'd come to say. "He wrote something. On the back of your mother's photograph. He said he never stopped loving her." Jasmine's face crumpled. Just for a second, just a flash, I saw the little girl she must have been. The little girl who waited for a father who never came. Then she pulled herself together, straightened her shoulders, wiped her eyes. "Well," she said. "Good for him. I hope it kept him warm at night." She turned to leave, then stopped. Looked back at me over her shoulder. "Did you know?" she asked. "About us?" "No," I said. "Not until 3 days ago. I found those letters in his garage after he died." She nodded slowly. "Then I'm sorry, for you. For finding out like this. That can't have been easy." And then she walked away, the box tucked under her arm. And I stood there on the sidewalk outside an elementary school in West Philadelphia, watching her go, and I thought, that's it. That's the end of the story. Robert's secret is out, and there's nothing left to do but learn to live with it. I was wrong. 2 days later, my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. "Hello? Mrs. Mitchell?" A woman's voice, older, familiar somehow, though I couldn't place it. "Yes? This is Diane Washington, Jasmine's mother. She told me you came to see her. That you gave her Robert's box." My heart started hammering. "Yes, I'm sorry if I upset her. I just thought—" "No," Diane interrupted. Her voice was gentle. "No, you did the right thing. I'm calling because—" She paused. I heard her take a shaky breath. "I'm calling because there's something you should know. Something Robert probably never told you." I sat down. "What?" "He didn't abandon us," Diane said. "Not completely. Not in the way Jasmine thinks. I told her he did. It was easier, cleaner. But the truth is he tried. In the beginning, he really tried. He wanted to leave you, wanted to be with me and the baby. But his father found out about us, about the pregnancy. And he told Robert if he left you, if he chose us, he'd cut him off completely. No money, no inheritance, no help with the hardware store Robert was trying to start. And more than that," her voice broke, "more than that, he told Robert he'd make sure I never saw a penny of child support. That he'd drag me through court, make it so ugly and expensive I'd have to give up Jasmine. Maybe even lose her to the state." I couldn't breathe. Robert's father had been dead for 20 years, but I could still picture him. Cold, controlling, ruthless. A man who believed in appearances above all else. A man who would absolutely destroy a young black woman to protect his son's reputation. Robert chose you, Diane continued. But not because he loved you more. Because he was scared. Because he was weak. Because he thought if he stayed with you, at least I'd be safe. At least Jasmine would be safe. He sent money, you know. For years. Not much, he couldn't risk you finding out. But every month an envelope would arrive. Cash, no return address. It stopped when Jasmine was 10. I think that's when his father died and he didn't have to hide it anymore. Or maybe that's when his guilt finally ran out. I was crying now, silent tears streaming down my face. Why are you telling me this? Because I spent 40 years hating him, Diane said. And I taught my daughter to hate him too. But I found something in that box you gave her. A letter he never sent. Written to me, dated the month before he died. He said he was sorry. He said he was a coward. He said he wished he'd been braver. And he said... Her voice broke again. He said he thought about us every day. About what might have been. I closed my eyes. I'm so sorry, I whispered. For all of it. For not knowing. For being the reason he stayed. Don't, Diane said firmly. Don't do that. You didn't know. You didn't do anything wrong. And truthfully, I don't think you were the reason. I think he was just scared. Scared of his father, scared of judgment, scared of being cut off from everything he knew. Love isn't always enough. Sometimes fear wins. We talked for another hour. She told me about raising Jasmine alone, about the struggles and the small victories. I told her about Amy, about our life in Newark, about the man I thought Robert was. And slowly, together, we pieced together a fuller picture of the man we'd both loved. A man who was neither hero nor villain. Just human, just flawed. Before we hung up, Diane said, Jasmine wants to meet Amy, your daughter, if that's okay with you. She says she'd like to know her sister. My heart clenched. Yes, I said. Yes, of course. Amy would like that too. 3 weeks later, we all met at a cafe in Princeton, neutral ground. Amy, 9 months pregnant and nervous as a cat. Jasmine, quiet and guarded. Diane, warm but watchful. And me, the wife who'd never known she was sharing her husband with a ghost. At first, it was awkward, painful. Amy cried. Jasmine was stiff and formal. But then Amy's daughter, my granddaughter Maya, did what children do. She broke the tension. She toddled over to Jasmine and held up her stuffed bunny, offering it with that sweet, unself-conscious generosity only children have. Jasmine took the bunny, looked down at this little girl, her niece, and something in her face softened. She smiled. And in that smile, I saw Robert again. Not the man who'd lied to me for 40 years, but the man who'd hummed while he worked, who'd held Amy when she was born and cried with joy, who'd been good and flawed and human. We're not a perfect family. We'll never be perfect. The hurt is still there, the betrayal, the years of secrets. But we're trying. Amy and Jasmine text now. Maya calls Jasmine Auntie Jazz. Diane sent me a Christmas card. And me? I'm learning to live with the truth. That my marriage was both real and fake. That Robert loved me and didn't. That life is messy and complicated, and sometimes the people we love the most are the ones who hurt us the deepest. I still live in the house in Newark. I drive past Mitchell's Hardware sometimes. It's a cell phone store now. I sleep in the bed Robert and I shared for 40 years. And some nights when I can't sleep, I go out to the garage. I sit on his old stool, surrounded by the tools he left behind, and I think about the photograph of Diane laughing in the sunshine. About the letters. About the words, I never stopped loving her, and I think, maybe that's okay. Maybe we don't have to be the only love, the greatest love, the most important love. Maybe it's enough to have been loved at all, even partially, even imperfectly. Maybe that's all any of us can hope for. The truth is complicated. Love is complicated. And forgiveness is the most complicated of all. But I'm trying, we're all trying, and maybe in the end, that's enough.